Hello my friends, how are you doing? I'm in Barcelona for you with my camera. We'll shoot POV style point of view so you can watch through my GoPro what I'm doing. I will explain a little bit about the shots. Also my Patreon supporters get bonus videos where I show them how I edit some of the shots and some raw files so you can edit them yourselves. Let's do this. When I came from the airport into Barcelona, I arrived at the Estación de França, and you can see that this is really a beautiful old school train station. And in this shot, I wanted to capture the dimension of that room, how big that train hall is. Also, that beautiful clear roof that you can see through, you can have these beautiful sky colors and everything comes together. I think like in that time we had such a beautiful architecture that still had this kind of mystery and exoticness about it that really gives you more of this kind of dreaminess. Next we have a shot of this beautifully engineered metal roof. I didn't want to have a classic shot of the station with all of the different platforms. I wanted to have a focus on all the metal here, on all these rivets, and black and white was a good choice for that, a warmer form of a black and white picture, because I want to have these patterns. Now we venture into the beautiful entrance hall of that station, these three amazing domes. I decided on a wide angle shot, camera very close to the ground looking upwards, and compared to the warm black and white look here, I decided on a more modern version, especially also because of these elements that hang down, like that ring looks like a satellite station, and behind that this grid like a longitude and latitude system. So I wanted to have a more crisp look and bring out all these fine lines in the design. For the last shot in this station, I found by chance this open standing door, and it serves as a beautiful divider that we can use as a contrasting element where we have this flat but very ornament-filled door, and then in the background a deep look into the hall showing us the dimension of that space. So for the editing, I wanted to have a contrast also where the hall is very warm and the foreground is almost black and white to bring out that contrast even more. Right next to the train station is the Park de la Ciutadella, and there I found these really cool twin palms, and I wanted to photograph them through the bush so I have a nice foreground with some structure in there. For the editing, I decided I also wanted to have a cool look, so I created a modern variation of the teal and orange look. You can see that the values are more flat and because of that a little bit more stylish and fashionable. Next, I came across the amazing monument of Rios and Toilet. It's where you exit the park to cross over to the Arc de Triomphe. And for this, I wanted to have a very dynamic shot where the monument is rising into the sky. You have these beautiful clouds in the background, almost like an aura surrounding that monument. And for the editing, I wanted to complement that, bring a lot of drama in there, beautiful warm colors. I made the monument rather bright in the foreground, so it stands there very proudly. We have a lot of detail in there, but at the same time the structure is soft, so it's not too much texture, it's not too much sharpening, but you see clearly the details. Also the green has been brought out a little bit, but at the same time flattened down so it's not too loud and really fits that sculpture. We are almost at the Arc de Triomphe, and here's a cute little shot through these dried up palm leaves. It's a classic frame-in-frame technique where you can see the leaves and the street light give you a focus on that arc, also on the ground that pattern is leading up to that arc, and then I supported all of that with the editing where the warm and bright light is directly on our main subject. The rest of it is darker, less values, flatter color, so everything comes together. I really enjoy that shot. Now we are finally at the Arc de Triomphe, and for this I wanted to have a dynamic shot where the building is rising into the sky to bring out that powerful, glorifying purpose of the building. I wanted to isolate that arc and also bring that out through the editing. So for this I have a very stylized edit that is focused mainly on the building. All the other values are black and white, and you can also see I have a strong vignette on the corners, so this gives even more style, even more center focus. Let's change locations and go over to the Gothic quarters. Here we have a lot of these narrow alleys. They are very beautiful but difficult to photograph because we have a challenging light situation with a bright sky and dark shadows down in the alley. So this is perfect for raw photography where you can do a lot of enhancements afterwards, bringing up the shadows, pushing down the highlights. In this case, the sky was completely blown out, so I colored it in with a natural blue, and I think the result is pretty beautiful. A very rewarding subject at these narrow alleys is of course when you shoot upwards at a crossing and these four buildings face each other. Again, a little bit of a conflicting light situation, but in this case not such a problem because you're shooting directly at the sky, exposed for the sky, and then again with a raw file bring back the values from the shadow. Here I wanted to have also an intense orange color on the building to bring a lot of dynamic in that, almost make it vibrant and moving, so you see this high rising, uprising structure of the building and really get a feeling of how you are surrounded by these structures. Our next shot brings us to a building that is also in the Gothic quarters and is famous for its look. I couldn't find the name, maybe you can help me with that. And a lot of this shot is depending on the editing afterwards, because the structure of the building already is very nice, but to bring it out, to bring that feeling alive through the editing, you can see here, put in some orange values, the sky is a little bit teal, there's a lot of structure and texture in the editing, and it really brings together that feeling. Also, the vignette that is focusing everything more onto that center part really brings the dynamic to life. For the next shot, I don't have a video because it was photographed at night. This is the Cathedral of Barcelona, and I photographed this freehand, which gives me so much joy because modern cameras are just so capable of doing that. It's really impressive how crisp and how many details we have in that shot. Also, the editing was really important for that, to differentiate the two areas of the gate, the door where you come in. I wanted this to feel like a portal to another dimension with this nice orange light, and then in the background you have these a little bit teal blue values also on the surface of the cathedral to really separate out the value, give this a story, and then the dynamic of the shot that makes this building rising into the sky brings a lot of drama to the shot on top of that. When you come to Barcelona, you should absolutely visit the Picasso Museum, and when you look at his works, please look at how he changed the subject of how he paints. So the painting is modern, but the style he's painting, like the way he's using his brushes, is still in the classic style compared to more modern painting. So compare him to later painters and see how that really changed in art. So he made the first step stylistically, but not in the way you paint, right? So that's a really interesting difference. It's the next day and our destination is the beautiful Park Güell. You can see that there's an overcast sky. It's actually darker than it looks in the video. And I wanted to capture the beautiful clouds, so I exposed for the sky. a difficult light situation, but again, with RAW, this is no problem. You have already seen me edit this photo in another video that I will link below. Here, I added a lot of warmth to it to bring a beautiful sunrise light and feeling into that, and then also bring the colorful values of that location out with some saturation and texture. All around the giant balcony where I already took the first shot, you have these wonderfully swung benches, and again I exposed for the sky and afterwards edited it with the focus on that orange patch in the foreground. That's the most important part here. I wanted this to harmonize with the light in the sky that we see back there, and then also have the blue values in the shadow reflect the blue values in the sky, so everything comes very nicely together. Our next shot is another example of how you can use foreground elements to bring attention to the main subject. I use these palm leaves to cancel out the sky, and you can see how much more interesting and dynamic the shot becomes because of it. Then I used the editing to bring color and warmth to our background, especially the main building, but also some nice blue to our overcast sky, while the palm trees are dark and desaturated. It is the next day and we are at the famous Pobleno Cemetery. You should absolutely visit because it has so many beautiful sculptures. Now when you enter, you have these long alleyways with a lot of graves on both sides. I wanted to have the editing more quiet, so flatter but at the same time beautiful colors, and bring attention to these machines that the visitors can use to clean the graves and renew the flowers. So the one in the front I made brighter, gave it more detail compared to the background, and also brought it in a nice perspective with a thirds grid. Now here is one of these beautiful grave sculptures where we have an angel gently touching the relief of the deceased person. I wanted to bring this softness and emotion out with the editing, so I made the picture a lot darker and focused on the chiaroscuro that we already talked about in the live stream. That is this nice warm light coming from one side, also giving us rim lights that bring out the three-dimensional structure of the surface, and at the same time having so much emotion in the expression of the final image. Here we have the most famous sculpture of the cemetery called the Kiss of Death. And in this case, I wanted to have the camera at the same level as the kiss and remove all the color, but have a warm, soft black and white look that brings in the softness of the emotion that is happening here. I also made the skull and the face of the sculpture a little bit brighter, so there's more attention to it, while at the same time bringing back the brightness of the sky, so there is not too much attention on the upper part of the image. This cemetery has so many beautiful sculptures that play out scenes in a lifelike style. And in this case, we have a woman releasing a dove into the sky. So I wanted to bring that dynamic out by following it with my camera. At the same time, through the editing, I wanted to have the sky dramatic but open and welcoming the dove, while contrasting the sculpture by making it bright and also creamy warm to differentiate it from the cooler background. Our next destination is the Palau de la Música Catalana, and before you enter it, you find this beautiful building here. As you can see, I edited it again in a little bit of an orange teal style, brought out a lot of the structures on the surface with texture and clarity, but at the same time I removed some offending elements like a street sign and a lamp on the building, and of course that kind of parking sign in the foreground. Now we are inside the Palau de la Música, and you can see that there's a lot of very beautiful sights to see. It's quite a small destination, but there are so many really awesome photo opportunities. You can see here that I brought up the lights in the photo, I brought some more warmth to it, and I played of course with the colors to bring out all of the brilliance and the details this room has to offer. Of course, the breathtaking light on the ceiling calls for its own shot. It's one of the most amazing LED glass constructions I've ever seen, and I took a lot of attention to bringing out the details, especially the colors, and really paying attention to the vibrance, to the different orange, red and yellow tones in the lower parts, and then the contrasting colors in the upper part, because its design is very intricate, bringing contrasting colors always together, and so this is a very vibrant structure. Inside the concert hall on the upper level, you find this beautiful hallway on the left side. I wanted to bring out the dimension, so again I brought my camera very close to the ground. Again, a bit of a difficult light situation, but no problem for RAW. And in editing, I wanted to bring out the lightness, the dreaminess of this whole design and room and construction. So I made all the colors very light, brought down the contrast, brought all the values closer together, and used pastel colors to make everything so soft and dreamy that it almost floats away. This balcony with its amazing colorful columns is also inside the Palau de la Música and one of the most famous spots for Instagrammers in Barcelona, at the same time a bit of a hidden spot. Of course, I wanted to bring out the amazing colors, intensify them, and have this center perspective to really bring the depth in there and the dynamic you get from the row of these columns on both sides. Here is also a wider shot of the same scene, which draws you in even more. So here are your questions that I want to answer in Barcelona on my photo trip. Kasnas asks, does gear matter to you when you're out and about? I would say it matters in the sense that you're able to take the shot you want to take, and that depends on the kind of camera you have. For example, if you want to have, for example, a high quality photo that you can edit intensely afterwards, you probably want to have a mirrorless or a DSLR and shoot in RAW. Then if you have an action shot or more a rough situation or a small space, probably a GoPro is better. When it comes to lenses, for example, you can't shoot with a, let's say, like a medium range lens. You can't do the same thing as with a fisheye lens or with a tele lens, for example. Also with the aperture, if you have a kit lens and it only goes to 3.5 or it only goes to 4 aperture, you can't reach that level of bokeh and softness in the background that you would get from a lens that has 1.8, 1.4. If you have an APS-C camera, there are very cheap options for a 50mm 1.4 or 1.8, but can nice soft bokeh. Also, the lens depends on how it skews the picture, and sometimes you want it to be skewed. For example, when you photograph sculptures or architecture or action scenes, you want it to like stretch the dimensions between the foreground and the background, so certain parts of the image look larger than they would be and there's a more action and dynamic in the shot. Then when you, for example, do a portrait shot, a fashion shot, stuff like that, you want it to be not skewed, not distorted in any kind of way. So for example, if you have a mirrorless full frame, a 85mm would be good for that. If you have an APS-C lens, a 50mm would be good for that, because it just keeps all of the structure intact if you photograph a person, stuff like that. Then, of course, it is important for how fast can you shoot, stuff like that, you know. For example, if you need a lot of exposures in a short time, like you want to do a burst shot, and the camera has to be able to do these many shots. So it really depends on the occasion of what you want to photograph. Let's go to the next one here. So Simon says, how do you avoid on the street not to be attacked by people? Well, ideally you want to avoid photographing people without their consent. So it's better to ask them beforehand. Sometimes you are in a situation where people are there and they can be photographed. For example, if they work there, like an actor in an amusement park, for example, you know what I mean? Or I would even say a clerk in a shop, maybe. If you like, if they have a shop that goes out to the street, it's kind of expected in the touristy zone that they are being photographed. You can still ask them, of course. Or in the market, the salesperson on their stand, probably they are happy about being photographed because they're getting photographed by tourists all the time. If it's a stranger, I would ask them if they are okay with that, or maybe photograph them from behind so you don't see the face, they can't be identified, and just add to the scene in that way, you know, or in the reflection where you just can't identify the person. Let's go on to the next question. Let's see, the next question is by Joe, and he says, do you like to go out at certain times of the day to take pictures? Well, usually there is 3 different ways or times to go out to take pictures. The morning is good because you have nice sunlight, often also nice clouds there, and you have a blue hour and the golden hour in the morning, and you have also the same thing in the evening with the sunset, which is the second time. It's really good where you have very nice, interesting light, long shadows, all these kind of things. Then often it's good when it's overcast if you want to have soft light on the scene, on the characters, but you can also photograph during the day if you have some more, you want to have some more action light, aggressive light. That might also be good in some situations. And of course, sometimes you just don't have the choice. But what I would absolutely suggest to you is, if you know where you go in advance, check where the light is coming from, if it's better to go there in the morning or in the evening or during the day. Because sometimes, for example, you have a building and then you come in the evening and want to take a sunset shot and you realize the sun is on the other side, so you can't do that, or you are in the shadow of a mountain suddenly and you should have come in the morning. So there is apps for that, like for example photo pills, that will show you where exactly the sun will be at what time. It even has a VR or AR function that shows it to you on location. Another thing, if you have the time to do that, is that I would maybe scout the location beforehand, especially if you come with a model that you want to photograph, so that you already know the places, and take some shots with your smartphone of the situations, of the places you want to photograph, so you have a little bit of a diary, a little bit of a memory of what kind of shots you wanted to prepare for. And then if you do that, if you scout the location beforehand, you can also think about the gear you need, the lenses you need, and stuff like that, to take the shots in the way you want them to be taken. Here are also the Facebook questions. Thank you very much for them. So Nick says, do you have a pre-shot agenda or storyboard that you plan out before you go for the shoot? And I would say, when you go with a model and you have an idea, there's a lot of preparation involved. What kind of outfit is it? What kind of person is it? What kind of situation, what kind of story do you want to do? What kind of light situation do you need? What kind of equipment do you need to set that up? So for that, you prepare and have kind of a story and the idea, and you talk it through with the model, and maybe also like a makeup person or something like that. So you have everything you need for the shot when you go there, because a lot of people invest a lot of time in that. So everything should work out in that kind of situation, right? Let's go for the next question. Lee says, how important is it to process your composite images before placing them into your project? Whew, that's It depends on the shot, I would say. Like, I often work with pictures from the internet. They already pre-processed, so you don't need to do that. If you have your own shots, of course, I would suggest to bring them into a state where they have the look you need for the composite you want to do, because then you have less work. And also, often if you work with raw files, you don't want to have like a huge stack of raw files inside of your Affinity Photo file. So you process them, export them as a JPEG, import them into your project, and then you can use them as layers for your artwork, right? Jonathan says, well, that's a difficult question because photography is different for everyone, and I totally agree with that. That's actually a good point. When you take a photo, I would really suggest that you think about what is your kind of perspective, how do you look at the photo, and also try to look at the situation differently than you would look with your eyes, because then you have the opportunity to reveal something new to the viewer. If you photograph a situation like everyone sees it, which is good for a holiday snapshot if you don't have enough time to really plan the shot, that's okay. But if you have the time, try to find an angle, try to find a way to photograph it where not everybody has seen it before and it represents your own kind of idea in the photo. For example, if I photograph people or sculptures also, I try to put some emotion into the shot. Often you can do that with bokeh, with a nice angle. You can make it more dynamic, these kind of things, and you bring some feeling into the shot. So I feel like the shot is a lot more interesting to look at than rather to say, look at, there is an interesting sculpture. You bring it alive and you kind of bring the story that the sculpture has in it into motion and kind of make it like a little film basically, but as a photo, if you know what I mean.